It really makes you think, like how many different ways we've come up with to talk to each other as humans.
Yeah.
Just amazing, all the languages out there.
Absolutely.
Just a real testament to our creativity, I guess.
Yeah.
And today we're going really deep into a specific group of languages that I find totally fascinating.
Very interesting, yeah.
The Pamir languages.
That's right, the Pamir languages.
So for our listeners, we're talking about a cluster of languages spoken in a really small area.
Small area, but very mountainous.
Very mountainous, yeah.
Central Asia, mostly.
Primarily Tajikistan.
Tajikistan, Pakistan, Afghanistan.
Afghanistan, right?
Yeah.
So think of this like, for our listener who's always eager to learn something new without like getting bogged down in the details.
Yeah, yeah.
This is like your express ticket to understanding this fascinating little corner of the linguistic map.
That's a good way to put it.
We're talking about roughly 100,000 people.
Roughly, yeah.
Who speak not just one language, but several.
Several distinct languages.
And often with their own local variations.
Yeah.
And all within, a relatively small area.
Right.
That's pretty remarkable.
Absolutely.
So what would you say is the most likely explanation for this kind of, this intense concentration of linguistic diversity in such a confined space?
Well, the geography is definitely a huge factor.
Yeah, the mountains.
Yeah, the mountains, the difficult living conditions.
Yeah.
Historically, that meant that communities were often very isolated from each other.
Right.
So they kind of developed their own ways of communicating.
Out of necessity.
Out of necessity, exactly.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
And often naming their language after their village.
Right.
Or maybe like the river.
The river.
That they live near.
Yeah.
It's really fascinating.
Yeah, you can kind of see how the landscape itself has shaped how people talk.
Absolutely. It's a real world example of how necessity is the mother of invention, but like in the world of language.
Precisely. Yeah.
Now, to make things a bit more complicated, this region hasn't always been, sort of on its own.
Right.
Historically, these territories have been part of different empires and kingdoms. We're talking about Russia.
Right.
The Soviet Union.
The Soviet Union.
At various times.
Yeah.
Also the Persian Empire.
Right. Yeah.
That's actually really important when we think about the sources of information we have on these languages.
It is, yeah.
A lot of the early work, the research on these Pamir languages, was done by Russian linguists.
Right.
And you'll also find stuff in Persian, which brings us to sort of the main source we're drawing from today for this deep dive.
Yeah.
We're really going to be looking closely at the work of the English linguist John Payne.
Right.
Specifically, his chapter on Pamir languages in a book called Compendium Linguarum Iranicarum,
right,
which was published in 1989. So let's jump into this. What's sort of the geographic heartland, the center of these Pamir languages?
Well, according to John Payne, it's really centered around the Panj River.
Okay.
And this is where things get interesting.
Oh, I'm intrigued.
You see, this river system, it kind of connects us back to this incredible archaeological discovery.
Okay.
So in northeastern Afghanistan, where the Panj and Kokia rivers meet, there's this site called Shortukai.
Shortukai.
Yeah, and what makes this so fascinating is its connection to the Harappan civilization.
Okay, Harappan civilization.
Also known as the Indus Valley Civilization.
The Indus Valley Civilization, wow.
This was one of the major Bronze Age civilizations,
right,
predating the Egyptian and Mesopotamian civilizations.
Really?
Yeah, flourishing between roughly 3000 and 1500 BCE.
Wow, that's going way back.
Going way back, yeah.
So what's the connection there to the Pamir languages that we're talking about?
Well, the Harappan language itself is still undeciphered. And linguists aren't even sure which language family it belongs to.
Really?
So there's no direct proven link to the Pamir languages we see today.
Okay.
However, you've got this major civilization flourishing in this area millennia ago,
right,
where we now find these unique languages. It's
right.
It adds this incredible layer of historical depth to the story.
It's like a missing link.
It's a missing link, yeah.
In a way.
In a way, it's just a very long and complex history of human communication in this region.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and a puzzle for anyone who's really interested in the deep history of language.
A puzzle for sure.
Yeah.
So let's come forward in time a bit.
Right.
And look at how these languages are spread geographically today.
Okay. What
would you say is the southernmost of these Pamir languages?
Geographically speaking, the southernmost would be Waki.
Waki. Okay.
frozen in the Wakan corridor.
The Wakan Corridor.
You might have heard of that before.
Oh, yeah, the Wakan Corridor.
Yeah.
It's that narrow strip of land that kind of sticks out.
Exactly, sticks out eastward.
Yeah.
And historically, it was a particularly difficult part of the Silk Road.
Right.
Interestingly, its current political status, being part of Afghanistan, is a result of this agreement between Russia and England in 1895.
Okay.
They basically created this buffer zone
Right.
to keep their spheres of influence separate.
So even political maneuvering from over a century ago has had an impact on where these languages are spoken today.
Absolutely.
It's amazing how interconnected everything is.
Yeah.
So what about on the eastern side?
On the eastern side, we have Sangklatchi.
Okay, Sankletchi.
Now, this one has a double distinction.
Oh,
It's not only the easternmost of the Pamir languages, it's the easternmost language of the entire Iranian language family,
wow.
spoken right on the border between what was the Soviet Union and China.
Okay, so we've got this diverse geographic spread across this very mountainous terrain.
Absolute.
But how different are these languages from one another?
Well, this is where it gets really fascinating.
Okay.
Both the Russian linguist T.N. Pakalina, who wrote a book on Pamir languages in 1969,
Right.
and John Payne, in his later work, emphasized just how distinct these languages are.
Okay.
Someone who speaks one Pamir language simply cannot understand someone speaking another.
Really? That's pretty remarkable considering how close they are geographically.
It is, yeah.
You'd almost expect some level of mutual intelligibility,
You would, yeah.
like you might find with different dialects of the same language.
Yeah, but not in this case.
Not at all.
No, not at all.
Okay.
And what makes it even more intriguing is the apparent lack of a clear proto-language.
So proto-language, what's that?
So that's like a reconstructed ancestor language
Okay.
from which all the Pamir languages could have developed.
So we can't really trace them back to a single common ancestor.
It seems that way, yeah.
It's fascinating.
It really is. It's like you discover a group of related species in biology, but there's no clear common ancestor.
Right.
Makes you rethink how they evolved.
Makes you wonder how they even ended up being related.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It suggests a very, very long period of independent development.
So if they can't understand each other, how do people in this region communicate across these linguistic boundaries?
Well, bilingualism is key.
Bilingualism. Like,
Yeah,
oh,
while these communities might have been isolated geographically,
Right.
there was still interaction.
Mm-hmm.
So most people in the Pamir region are bilingual.
Okay, so they speak their native Pamir language
Right.
for local communication.
Yeah.
And then they also know an official regional language.
Exactly.
So that would be Tajik on the side that was part of the Soviet Union.
Right.
And Dari in Afghanistan.
That's right.
Okay.
And what's interesting is that many people learn a second Pamir language as well.
Oh, really?
Yeah, often Shuni.
Shuni?
Yeah, it seems that Shuni in some areas acts as a lingua franca.
A lingua franca? Like a common language?
It's a common language, yeah.
Okay.
Used for wider communication.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So let's dig into some of these language groupings.
Okay.
You mentioned the Shuni-Rushani group.
Right, so this is a significant cluster within the Pamir family.
Yeah.
It includes Shuni itself, which has several dialects.
Right.
You have Rushani, spoken around the village of Rushan.
Okay.
Bartangi, spoken along the Bartang River.
Mm-hmm.
Oroshori, spoken near the village of Oroshor.
Mm-hmm.
And finally, Sarikoli, which is the easternmost of all the Pamir languages.
Okay, so it's like a family of languages.
Yeah, like a family.
Closely related, but still distinct,
Exactly. Distinct enough that they can't easily understand each other.
like cousins.
Like cousins, yeah.
So when we talk about languages with fewer speakers,
Yeah,
one thing that always comes to mind is the question of written forms.
right.
What's the history of writing for these Pamir languages?
Well, traditionally, as both Pakalina and Payne document, all the Pamir languages were unwritten.
Unwritten.
Yeah, there had been some attempts to create written scripts,
Okay.
but these were largely unsuccessful.
So for a long time, they were purely oral languages.
Purely oral, yeah.
Wow, that must have been a challenge for preserving them.
It was, yeah. Imagine trying to keep this rich linguistic heritage alive without a written form.
Relying solely on oral tradition.
Exactly.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
But it sounds like there was a breakthrough at some point.
There was, in 1982,
Fact?
a Soviet linguist named Karamshov,
Karamshov.
yeah, who was actually a native speaker of a Pamir language himself,
Oh, wow.
decided to create Alphabets.
Alphabets.
Yeah, for all the Pamir languages.
For every single one.
Every single one.
That's a huge undertaking.
It was.
He even published these alphabets along with examples of poetry in a book.
He did, yeah.
That's incredible.
It was a monumental step.
Right, for documentation.
Documentation, preservation.
Imagine the dedication that must have taken.
Yeah, I mean, coming from the community itself.
Right.
It's a real testament to the importance of these languages.
And it sounds like the story doesn't end there.
It doesn't, no.
Okay.
In 2021, something truly remarkable happened.
Okay.
The first book written entirely in a Pamir language was published.
Wow, which language?
It was in Bartangi.
Bartangi.
Which belongs to that Shunyarushani group.
Right.
And it actually presented 2 texts.
Okay.
Written in both Cyrillic and a Latin-based script.
Wow, so they're really making strides in preserving these languages in written form.
Absolutely, yeah.
That's really encouraging to hear.
It is, yeah.
So besides the Shunyarushani group, what are some other distinct Pamir languages?
Well, we have Yagnobi, which is considered the westernmost.
Yeah.
Spoken along the Yagnob River.
Okay.
Then there's Ishkashimi, spoken around the town of Ishkashim.
Ishkashimi.
And this one's interesting because it's spoken on both sides of the border.
Both sides.
The Tajik and Afghan sides.
Oh, wow. So it transcends the political boundaries.
It does, yeah.
That's really interesting.
Yeah, it shows how language doesn't always follow the lines drawn on a map.
Absolutely. And earlier we briefly mentioned Zazaki.
Zazaki, yeah, that one's spoken in the village of Zibak.
Zibak.
Which is in the Ishkashim area.
Okay.
But there are some conflicting accounts about Zazaki.
Okay.
Some sources, including Payne's article from 1989,
Right.
suggest that the community in Zibak may have shifted entirely to speaking Persian.
Oh, really?
But there's also a sense that Zibak is very multilingual.
Okay.
So it's possible that Zazaki is still spoken alongside other languages.
A bit of a mystery.
A bit of a mystery, yeah.
Yeah.
More current research would be really valuable there.
Yeah, I mean, linguistic landscapes change all the time.
They do, yeah.
It's hard to keep up.
It really is.
So what else is on the linguistic map of this region?
Well, we also have Sanglichi, spoken around the village of Sangli.
Sanglichi. Okay.
And then as we get into areas with less documentation. Okay.
There are a few dozen known words of Waki.
Waki.
Spoken along the Wakhan River.
Mm-hmm.
And even more sparsely documented, there's a language called Skulami.
Skulami.
From an area in Afghanistan.
Yep.
For which we only have about 3 recorded words.
3 words.
Yeah, just these little glimpses into languages that are perhaps less widely spoken.
Or less studied.
Or less studied, yeah.
So we've talked about how distinct these languages are and how they're often mutually unintelligible.
Mm-hmm.
But what do they actually sound like?
Right, good question.
Are there any features linguistically that really set them apart?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
To give you an idea, let's take a look at Waki.
Okay.
One fascinating thing is their system of what linguists call delictic time forms.
Delictic time forms.
Yeah, these are ways the language indicates different points in time relative to the speaker.
Okay.
So in Waki, there are 3 of these.
Okay.
Amnagalan.
Amnagalan.
Which means near or present time. Okay. Then there's Admionagalan.
Admionagalan.
That indicates a middle time.
Middle time.
Like the recent past or near future.
Okay.
And finally, Adurnagalan.
Adurnagalan.
Which means far past or distant future.
So it's like built into the grammar, this sense of time.
It is, yeah.
More nuanced than we have in English.
Yeah, it's more finely grained.
Right.
It's like the language itself is pushing you to think about time differently.
It's fascinating how language can shape our perception of things like that.
Absolutely.
What else makes Waki unique?
Well, in Waki, adjectives have limited variability.
Limited variability, meaning?
Meaning they don't change as much as they might in other languages.
Right.
And sometimes they use changes in vowels to indicate gender.
Oh, interesting.
So cat means male cat.
Okay.
Kit means female cat.
So a small change in sound carries a significant meaning.
Right. It's very efficient.
Yeah, that's a neat trick.
It is, yeah. They also have specific ways of forming comparative and superlative adjectives.
They do, yeah.
So comparatives, meaning like more something.
More something, yeah.
Are often formed with suffixes.
Right.
And superlatives, meaning most,
something, yeah.
Are formed through reduplication.
Reduplication, which means repeating part of the word. Like saying something is very, very big to emphasize its size.
Okay, and what about verbs?
Verbs, yeah. So when it comes to how they change to show who's doing the action
Right.
and when, which linguists call conjugation,
Conjugation, right.
number and gender are often marked through endings,
Oh,
or even by moving different parts of the word around within the sentence.
so quite different from how we do things in English.
Very different, yeah.
Not just sticking an S on the end.
No, not at all.
Okay.
And finally, their system for numbers between 11 and 19 is additive.
Additive.
Yeah, which is a pattern you see in many languages, meaning they say 10 plus 1 for 11, 10 plus 2 for 12, and so on.
Okay, so some common patterns, but also those really unique features.
Right. A mix of the familiar and the exotic.
So in John Taine's article, there's a table that shows the demonstrative pronouns in these languages.
There is, yeah.
What can that tell us about the differences between them?
Well, demonstrative pronouns, those are words like the, this, that.
Okay.
And the table really shows how much these languages have diverged.
Okay.
The variety is what's striking.
Okay.
Some have the familiar 3 or 4 forms for singular and plural, but some have as many as 5.
5 different forms.
Yeah, distinguishing the plural from the plurals of this and that.
Wow.
And others might only have 1 or 2.
It's amazing how they've evolved so differently.
It is, even in something as fundamental as pointing things out.
It really highlights how long they've been on their own separate paths.
Absolutely, yeah.
It's just incredible when you think about it,
Yeah.
the geographic isolation, the lack of mutual intelligibility, the unique features.
Yeah.
It really emphasizes the extraordinary linguistic diversity packed into this small part of the world.
Yeah.
It's like a microcosm of human linguistic creativity.
Absolutely, yeah.
So for our listener who tuned in today, hoping to learn something new, I think the Pamir languages are just this perfect example.
Great example, yeah.
Of how unique
Yeah.
and varied human language can be,
Yeah.
even within a small area.
Absolutely.
What I find particularly fascinating is that even with these barriers, linguistic barriers, these isolated communities still found ways to connect and communicate, right?
As we see with the bilingualism.
The bilingualism, right?
And the efforts to create written forms.
So it's like this push and pull, right?
It is, yeah.
The landscape and history create this diversity, but then there's this human desire to connect.
Right, to bridge the gap.
To bridge those gaps, yeah. And it makes you wonder how many other linguistic treasures are out there just waiting to be discovered.
That's a great thought.
Right.
Yeah, it really makes you want to go explore.
Explore, absolutely.
Yeah.
Keep learning.
Keep learning.
That's what it's all about.
That's what it's all about.
Thank you.
Thank you.
For joining us.
Yeah, this was great.
For this deep dive.
The fascinating topic.
Into the Pamir languages.
Yeah.
Really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
And we'll see you next time.
See you next time.